Last thing to do is close the sleeve. That involves closing the bottom. So the bottom of the sleeve bag here, we close this edge. You might have this edge turned once and twice, the same way that we've enclosed the raw edges on the sides of the sleeves. I've left it open because I'm going to show you how to do it with a French seam, they're both ways are great. This way is a different way to what's written in the PDF, and it just shows you the other way to do it. And it has a really lovely appearance as well. So, here's the anatomy of the sleeve. We have the Sodayama, the sleeve mountain up the top, that runs along your shoulder. And the sleeve falls down to both sides. We're going to close down the front, and the back stays open. So the front is where your cuff is. The back lines up with the side seam. And then the bottom hangs down at the bottom of the sleeve bag. So we've got our mark in here, which is 20 centimeters down from the Sodayama, from the sleeve mountain. And that will make 20 centimeters, which is 8 inches. So the circumference of the cuff opening will be 16 inches or 40 centimeters. You might want to make that wider or narrower. That's up to you. And then we'll close down here. Well, first we'll close the sleeve bag. Then we'll close that. And then what we do here, can you see in this part here? Do you see that? Now this technically, that's absolutely lovely, and you can leave that. That's a beautiful edge. But you can see up here, it's, if I pull this really straight, so that's the side seam. This is the Miyatsu Gucci, just here. And this is where the sleeve meets the side seam. What we need to do is turn this in. These edges will be pressed out anyway. So the edge of this is already being trained up here to fold in, and what we're going to do is press that in on both sides like so, and then we're going to top stitch this down along here, along this line. And if you don't feel like top stitching, if you're not including top stitching, you can anchor this with, you can put really long hand stitches underneath it, or just little darts of stitches if you want as well from a machine, just to keep it light. The top stitching won't be that apparent, but also this is to keep this turned back, so then when the sleeve is hanging, it hangs straight. Do you see that, where it's meeting the side seam? So once this is all done, that will be so neat. Otherwise it's going to twist like this when you get up to this area, and it won't look good. So we either top stitch it or we secure it, but all that we're doing is securing this back. And if you want to do that in a simpler way, you can. If you were going to hand stitch it, you could put a little stitch in there that just catches one thread from the actual sleeve, and then goes onto the raw edge encasement, and then you could go about 2 inches before you put your next one in, because you are literally just securing these back so they don't come out and twist. And if you see here, we're using the training that this part of the fabric has to create the fold back, using the open seam. We're going to do the same over this side when it comes to the cuff. So once this is all closed, the cuff will be turned under like this, because the entire seam will be pressed in like that. So it'll be done to the right width and everything, but it will go from about here, and we'll top stitch over the top. And again, if you want, you can use a securing hand stitch if you don't want to have top stitching up there, and that will just keep the cuff, because the hand will come out here. So that's this part here, and we just top stitch that down on that side. So it's only a couple of things to do. The best way to do it is to create here. You create this first, you close the bottom of the sleeve bag. I'm going to do it as a French seam, so I need my wrong sides together. Once I've done that, I will then press back this part, but I won't sew it yet. I'll just press it back so it's ready while everything is open, because this will be closed here, but I'll be able to get in and really press it well. Then I will close this seam here, so the front of the sleeve bag up to the cuff entry point, and that will be turned back, and I'll press ready to sew this down as well, ready to top stitch that. Then I'll top stitch this one, I'll top stitch the cuff, and then the sleeve will be done. Now, before we start, one thing is that I'm doing the French seam down here, and I'm going to want that French seam to face back, to face the back. You can see here, there's the center back. So I want the French seam to be facing this way. So what I'll do is I'll just, you can do a couple of things for this. You could mark it with chalk, you could baste in a little stitch, but I'm going to put into there, I'm going to secure one pin and then 2 pins in case the first one falls out, which it might because we're going to move around a lot. And that's just there to tell me that this is the back of the sleeve. Do you see that there's the center back? This is the back of the sleeve, which means this is the front. If you were standing up with your arms outstretched like a scarecrow, this would be on your back and that would be on your front. And all that's going to do is help me determine which way I'm going to press the French seam. It might seem like a bit of an overreaction, but once you're in this and you're French seaming, so you're doing wrong sides together, then right sides together, and then you're wanting to press it, you're turning these back, everything's up on the ironing board. It's not laid out like this, and it's going to be confusing as to which side you're looking at. And if you can just put in a little marker and go, okay, that's where I'm looking, that's where I want this to go, it will make it easier, and it means that the 2 French seams will match in their direction. So they'll both go back or they'll both go forward. You can choose which way you want to do it. Back obviously is the better way to go. But that's what we do with that. And we do the French seam first, because once we have French seamed, these will then be turned back and they'll cover the end of the French seam. So let's crack on. The first thing we need to do is French seam the bottom of the sleeve bag. And to be honest, the most important side is the side that's closest to the side seam, because the sleeve bag is open at the back, so you can see into here and you can see this part of the seam, and it will be French seamed and then these will be turned back. So you want this to match up here more so than here. Of course, this is sheer fabric, so everything has to be absolutely hunky-dory, but if you're using fabric that you can't see through, you can be a bit more laissez-faire down into this corner, because that is not seen. So I'm turning back here, just turning back the back of the sleeve bag, so those enclosed seams right at the back here, and these will be top stitched down. And I'm trying to get as much done when the sleeve is nice and big and open like this, because soon it's going to become smaller and smaller, the spaces to work in, as we close the sleeve up. So I'm getting this done now. You can see that while I press that French seam in its last press, I press the start of this back in the center, which is a good place to start that. Then I can bring these across, line them up, and it's more important that they line up with the seam that they come out of, so as in the seam that goes into the body. And lining up at the bottom is important as well, but it's more important that they line up here, because this is where it's going to fall then dead flat straight out over the Miatsu Gucci. So you can see that. There's that pressed back, that will be top stitched. There's the French seam, that's now pressed back. And then when I do this seam up to the cuff opening, just push this back, the French seam. So it's going to sit here, and I'll start stitching at the point at which the French seam is sewn. So it makes a little corner like that, and it'll be easier to turn out rather than coming from all the way down here. And it keeps this French seam to the back. So I won't handle it too much because I want to get everything while it's nice and pressed. So let's get to sewing. Here's my gorgeous sleeve. I've got the right sides together. Do a quick check to make sure that everything lines up out here on my sleeve opening, or the sleeve front, sorry, leading up to the cuff, and I'll secure this down. Now, is that turned the right way? Yes. This is the back. So this is why I put that pin in, because I want to know where that back is. So then I'm going to pin up along here until the point of the cuff opening, which is 20 centimeters, 8 inches from the wrist, or the sudeyama, the sleeve mountain. Put a pin up there as well, and see how we go with keeping it even in between these 2 points. Oh, that's pretty good, isn't it? Look at that. Right. I'm going to throw a few pins in along here. And I'm going to sew the front of the seam bag closed. And at the point of the cuff opening, which is here, I'm going to do 5 back tacks, because this is another point of high stress on the garment. We're not far off. We are not far off. We are so close to the end now. It really is getting exciting. I can't wait for you to see this finished. So I'll just double check. Okay, my French seam is facing towards the back. There's the little cross for the back. And I'm going to go up until the cuff opening. All good. We've got right sides together. We're not doing a French seam anymore. Lovely. Let's commence. I'm going to now press this, and as I press this, you can see we've got the seam allowance here, like on all the other seams, and it will be pressed open, but of course I'll do it differently because we're going to be lying it on its side and pressing it open bit by bit, because we've got a corner down here that we're going to deal with as well. So I'm going to do that. As I do that, I'm going to go all the way up the opening of the sleeve, and I'm going to press it like so, and keep that seam allowance even all the way up, and then that forms the fold on which I will then top stitch around here from the other side to make the top stitching of the cuff. Off we pop. So I'm going to just open this up like that and press it down as far as I can, and then in the corner it's going to be turned to make a sharp corner. So you don't have to worry too much about that, because that's going to have its own kind of pressing once we get down there and turn the corner. So I'll just do this. It's a bit of a different way of pressing to what we've been used to. You're doing half of it here, half of it there. It's never really the whole thing all at once. But this will make it lovely and neat, and make it easier to find where it is you want to top stitch your cuff. That's all pressed and beautiful. So we're looking at it from the right side now, and we're going to do some top stitching on the sleeve. What I'm going to do is top stitch the cuff. Before I do that, I'll top stitch the back of the sleeve bag. So I'm going to come in at the point where the sleeve is joined to the body, so at the start of the Miyatsu Gucci, but on the sleeve bag, I'm going to sew down around there with a nice top stitch and come all the way back up. And you want to make sure that you're catching a lot of the fabric. So I've got my presser foot to the edge of the raw edge enclosure within there. So it's going to be a wide top stitch. but it's with a large stitch, so it's not too big. And if you had smaller seams, you could do that. And if your seams are very large, they come out to here, and you don't want to top stitch down, you can very easily just anchor it down with a couple of threads, with a couple of stitches, like really long stitches that would go from here, and then they might go another 4 cm, like nearly 2 inches apart. You're just anchoring it down. Nothing actually passes through here. It's just keeping the seam in place. But I'm going to top stitch it because I'm top stitching on this garment, and it will look absolutely gorgeous. And I'm stopping about 3/4 of an inch, about a centimetre, just back from where the sleeve is attached to the body and where the Miyatsuguchi starts. I don't want to get into there and start putting stitches and catching things, so I stay nice and clear. You see how this now has a perfect split here. Just there. If I didn't do that, this would have twisted out and sat like that at this juncture here. So now, once this is pressed, this is going to sit nice and flat. And if you hang the kimono up, you hang this garment up, it's going to be like that. Look at that. You could put a piece of paper there and it would be fine, rather than it sitting out like that. And once this is pressed, this top stitch will barely be visible. And I'm going to do the same now up here. Exactly the same method. This will have a nice bit of top stitching from about a centimetre in, up and around, down to the other side. So let's go get these things done. So here we are. And of course, because we have a lovely and imprinted should I say, Sodeyama, it's very easy to then make sure the cuff is in the right place and iron it down nice and flat. I'm going to get the seam first, make sure it's unroped and not gathering, and bring it up to that point. Oh, that is beautiful. Come down here to the corner of the sleeve bag. Make sure that that French seam is nice and pressed in again. It's already got its crease, but you just want to make sure things are sort of reiterated into the fabric. It's a good way to put it. You reiterate your pressing. Come down and unfurl that side. Oh, this is looking so good. And there's the sleeve. Perfect. Let's go sew a hem.